Again, just a reminder for my undergrad students, you should know the routine by now, but when we're done, sign in on the sign-in sheet that we'll have outside. I think we have the privilege of having our guest who has traveled the farthest to be here to join us today. Today was Scott Jensen, who is from the Alaska Dispatch News in Anchorage, Alaska. How many of y'all been to Alaska before? One? Wow.
One?
Two? Okay,
All
we've
right.
had two.
Great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place to go. So Scott is actually here as part of the MPPA workshop, which Dr. Dave Nolan is running at the Student Center this week. So they'll be talking about that a lot. Scott also has some insights into the business of the news world, which we need entrepreneurial thinking in the news world now more than ever. And so we'll have a lot of discussion about that. So let's thank Scott Jensen for joining us today.
Thanks.
Welcome, Scott. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
The furthest is, does he get an award for this?
A round of applause.
Okay, great. All right, award given then. We are holding the National Press Photographers Association Advanced Storytelling Workshop. We've been holding it here for 8 years now with some of the top photographers and journalists from all over the world coming to speak and present and teach visual storytelling. Scott is a first-timer to the workshop this year as a faculty member.
Yep.
We're extremely happy to have him here. The workshop has, this year we had almost 90 people attending the workshop with people from all over the world. We have people from Denmark and Norway this year, as well as all over the United States. So it's a really great treat for us to have everybody here, and especially the faculty who get to come to talk to you guys here at Texas State, our students. And that's one of the biggest reasons that we brought the workshop here. So
Yeah, thanks. This is a treat. I didn't realize I was going to be talking so much to college students, so it's been great.
Yeah, we really enjoy that. So a little bit about Scott, and then I'll let him kind of talk a little bit more in depth about what he does at the Alaska Dispatch News and how that whole synergy works in Anchorage. Scott is a two-time winner of the MPPA's Ernie Crisp Photographer of the Year Award. If you don't know what that is, it's like the Oscars for television news cameramen. And he has won that twice now. So it's a pretty amazing achievement. He's currently a multimedia journalist at the Alaska Dispatch News, which is Alaska's online-only news site, but he also does work with the newspaper. And he's going to talk about that because it's very complicated, the whole synergy between those two and how that works. Prior to that, Scott worked in Seattle at King 5. He was TV director of photojournalism there. One of the constants throughout his career has been his passion for passing on his knowledge and skills to other photographers in the television industry. From his earliest days, he's worked as a television photojournalist. Scott continues to be consumed with improving his own storytelling, which he's going to talk a lot about today, which is just amazing. And we're always learning and changing as we work in this industry. Major honor for Scott was an opportunity several years ago to serve as the University of Alaska Anchorage Visiting Atwood Chair of Journalism in the spring of 2011, where he taught courses and did some research and other things with the university. Since then, he's been a speaker, teacher, contest judge, television photographer, and photography at gatherings, the MPPA, the News Video Workshop, which is another workshop that the MPPA puts on, the Airborne and Flying Short Course Traveling Seminars, Ignite Your Passion, the Northern Short Course in Photojournalism, the Northwest Storytelling Workshop, National Association of Hispanic Journalists, Annual Convention, Michigan, Kentucky, New Mexico, Alaska Broadcasters Associations, and of course the Alaska Press Club. Alaska out.
Yeah, definitely.
And this week, obviously, here at the Storytelling Workshop, he also plays a really mean round of mini golf. Which was last night's. We didn't hurt anybody last night.
No, I got lucky on a couple of holes.
Here we go.
Definitely.
So the Alaska Dispatch was founded by journalist Tony Hopfinger in 2008, and I'm going to let Scott talk a little bit more about that. So welcome, Scott.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Yeah, and I want to say, you talked about my love for sharing information, and teaching, and I got to say, I have a lifelong passion of learning, and part of my learning is coming and sharing information and what I've learned with folks that, you know, don't have the same experience that I have. And so I'm learning from you as well. And so I learned from this experience, and that's part of the reason why I like doing it, is because it's gonna improve my skills and my experience along the way. So it improves my storytelling, and just hopefully as much as I am improving yours. So, yeah.
Tell us about the organization that you work for.
So
Alaska Dispatch News.
I work for the Alaska Dispatch News. That's not the homepage. That's my author page. But Dale, if you want to go to the main page there, just click on the banner. The Alaska Dispatch News is technically only a couple of years old. It's essentially a merger of two different companies. The Alaska Dispatch, which David mentioned, that started in 2008 by a gentleman named Tony Hopfinger, and the Anchorage Daily News, which is Alaska's not oldest newspaper. I mean, it's kind of complicated. It's an old newspaper, more than 50 years old. Anchorage Daily News started, way back in the mid 20th century, all the way up until 2014, when the Alaska Dispatch owner purchased the Anchorage Daily News and merged the two companies essentially into the Alaska Dispatch News. And so I work for a newspaper, but I do video mostly for online. I do some other still photos that get printed in the paper. Honestly, with my iPhone, a lot of my pictures in the paper are with my iPhone, and then frame grabs from video.
So tell us a little bit about your career. So where you started, how you got your start in television, and how that brought you to where you are now.
Okay, well, I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and in high school, I started developing an interest in video cameras and video editing. And so I had gotten enough experience where I just went down to the local NBC affiliate, the TV station there, and talked to the news operations manager and told him that I was interested in television. And so he said, here, you can have a job as a studio camera operator. And so I was in high school then. And that furthered my interest, and I ended up going to college for television production and communications. And after college, I went back to KTOU and was hired as an editor, videotape editor, and then as a photographer. And then I went to Minneapolis, where I worked at KARE 11 for about 4 or 5 years. And then from KARE, I moved to Oregon, and then from Oregon to Alaska. And I've been back and forth between Alaska and Seattle since about 2005. And most recently in Seattle, before this job, I was director of photography at King TV. And that's the NBC station in Seattle. And I managed a couple of dozen photographers and editors and freelancers, and helped set the philosophy for the news philosophy and news photojournalism, video journalism philosophy for that station.
Could you talk a little bit about maybe the Alaska Dispatch News and their approach to journalism and visual storytelling, especially since they're kind of a merged organization now?
Yeah, so I moved back to Alaska in July of last year, and then started working at the Dispatch in August. And I was brought on to really start exploring the ideas of getting more video online. That is an area that the Alaska Dispatch hasn't had a lot of emphasis, being a newspaper company. And, honestly, being in Alaska and possibly not having as much exposure to some of the, other more advanced and further down the road, like the Washington Post, the New York Times, and they have huge video departments. We had one other video journalist when I came on board, so there's 2 of us now, but all of the photographers to some degree shoot video and edit video, and we're getting into experimenting with how video is used, whether it's a standalone video story or if it's a piece of video that supports a larger story, or Dale, if you can go to the tab that says the Iditarod live blog over here at the end. So, for instance, in this story, this was the Iditarod sled dog race. So it's it starts the first Saturday in March, and it's one of the biggest news days in Alaska of the year. And so we sent. I was one of, I think, about 6 or 7 journalists that went to the ceremonial start in Anchorage. So it's where the race starts, and there's a lot of interest. So we had a couple of reporters. We had a couple of still photographers, and then I was down there shooting video on my iPhone, and that's what these interviews are right here with the different mushers. And so my job was to basically get some, just some live video color of the morning, and then we had an editor back at the station, it's a newspaper, it's not a TV station. I'm a TV guy. Hard habit to break. So we had an editor back at the office at the newspaper managing all of this information coming in, and then he would order the information as it came in. And so my video clips that I'd shot on my iPhone and then uploaded from the field right there, I'd edited on my iPhone as well and then uploaded. Those all got inserted into this live blog, and it's just a different way of following the race, the events of that day. And it's something that the newspaper hadn't done at that point.
So they hadn't done this before. This was the first year that they actually did this and followed it. It looks like they have a timeline that follows pretty much everything.
Yeah, to this degree. There's, of course, live-ish coverage of events, like this. But this was really the first time, I think, that they really incorporated video into the live blog like this. We did a live blog when President Obama had visited us last fall. He came to. He was the first president to visit above the Arctic Circle in Alaska in the United States. So that was a big deal for us. And so we had a live blog when he was running around town and making appearances and whatnot. So yeah, actually this video right here is that's a 4-time champion of the Iditarod right there. His name's Jeff King, and he was joking around with a Jack Russell Terrier, flipped him into his line. So that was one of our most popular videos for that morning. But you can see they're not complete stories. They're just little clips of kind of the color of what was going on.
Can't wait to see you in Nome. I have said 1,000 times that when you come across as a winner, our town will come Alaska will come
lots of
unglued.
characters.
This gentleman here.
Thank you.
And actually, I did a story on him separately later in the race. Actually, that's Dee Dee John there.
Hello,
I did a story on her later in the race as well. So
I'm going to try to be.
Richard Benville is his name. He's the new mayor of Nome, and he came to Anchorage to see all the mushers off. So if you don't know, the race goes from Anchorage. The sled teams go through the mountains and the rivers and go up to Nome. So he came, and he's quite the character. And some of these, actually, if you want to play that one, I actually asked him.
How you feeling?
Besides a broken back and the bronchitis, I'm pretty good.
So what happened with the bronchitis? Did you just get this recently?
Just recently. I'm almost done with it.
Yeah. And how's your back?
We'll find out.
Wow.
We've been covering this woman. Her name's Karen Hendrickson, and she's a musher I think she's been on the scene for about 7-8 years. And so people in Alaska are really familiar with her story. She had been in a car accident. It was an accident, of course, but a car had hit her team while she was training about a little more than a year before this. So she missed last year's race. And so Alaska's really interested, in this comeback story. And this was her first Iditarod back since her wreck. She had gotten hit by this car and gotten thrown 30 feet, and her dogs were. Some of them, I think, were hurt. I can't remember exactly. But she had broken her back, and she was healing up. And so she finished the race and did pretty well.
Now, this kind of approach isn't normal for you. I mean, this isn't something that you had done before in your career, these little short clips that
No.
were posted up because you were almost a pure television cameraman where you were telling stories
Yeah.
that were more television focused and not for the web. So these little types of clips and things are not normal for you.
No, they're not. And this is an area of my career that I know it's going. I know the business is going this direction, and so I'm definitely interested in learning about it. It's relatively easy. I mean, honestly, this kind of work is it's not difficult. It's not nearly as difficult as some of the other crafting of intricately told stories that I've done in the past. But it's important because the consumers want this, and especially if they don't have time or they don't want to take the time to watch a 3 or 4 minute story that may be well done, but they're just watching a clip like this that's part of a bigger picture multimedia coverage, then this is appropriate. This is an appropriate use of the medium.
So you've kind of changed your approach to how you tell stories a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah,
So this isn't normal, but it's something that niche that you're trying to reach, an audience that
Right.
is looking for this type of content.
Yeah, and it's more of a team approach. I've worked for most of my career. The primary product that I've produced has just been with one other person, a reporter, and myself, usually creating a story together. And in this case, I'm part of a 6-person team, and it's just different. I mean, it's still important, and it's still being consumed, which is ultimately what we're after. But it's just a different way of, is at least different for me. It's probably not different for you guys, because I mean, you guys are learning that this is normal. It's not really normal for me, but it is now. Are you maybe interested in seeing some?
Would you like to see
an
one
example?
of Scott's other types of stories, or other examples of stories that he's told?
Let me think. Let's see. Can I come up there, Dale, and check it out? All right, There's a story that I'm thinking of that one of my favorite. Here, it's this one here. Yeah, so one of my favorite ways of telling stories is to basically go out and cover an event, and I like to say shoot the news in the moment of news. And so essentially that is understanding the scene that's unfolding in front of you and being able to ask the right questions in order to elicit the response of the subjects in the story. So they are telling the story, their story, as it happens, as it unfolds. And that way you don't ever leave the moment. And I think that this is, does that make sense to everybody? You're not leaving the moment? So it's like my job as a journalist is to facilitate them telling their story as the story's happening. And so this story, I feel like it's a lighter story. It's a feature story. But it's, well, maybe I should just let it play, because there are a lot of layers into it, and it unfolds. So yeah, let's go ahead and play it there.
It's amazing that we're here. Like, I just can't believe it.
Hi.
Hello. Sundays are worthy of a celebration.
Thank
you so much.
Yeah.
This is one of them.
Number 1.
It's the last day standing between Madeline Kuhnlein
This is for nausea.
and the carefree life a 6-year-old girl is supposed to live.
Madeline's been very strong from the get-go.
This is her final dose of chemotherapy and a long battle with leukemia. For 796 days, Madeline missed being a kid. She could only return to class at Mount Erie Elementary in Anacortes once in a while she made memories at Children's Hospital in Seattle.
Her earliest memories are going to be of being poked and feeling sick.
So Mom and Dad thought today was the perfect time
After chemotherapy daily
to start new memories.
for 2 years, 2 months, and 7 days,
They sent out a request.
Madeline is near the end of her battle with cancer.
A request answered.
Right here. Oh,
you would like to help make the day extra special,
Whoa, that's a lot. Come here.
please mail a card to Madeline and Sophia,
All this.
our superheroes.
Oh my. And look at there.
Letters showed up from friends,
I didn't think we'd get so many people.
family,
Oh, look at these guys. Look at this.
even strangers in Anacortes and beyond.
This is all the way from Switzerland.
I'm free of leukemia.
One letter in particular
Look at all these wonderful people.
included a promise from Anacortes police.
I wrote a note on it that if she ever wanted to ride in a police car, come see us.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
With treatment at its end,
I kind of warned her there was a little surprise today.
officers made good on their promise.
So she's going to get that and a little more.
Congratulations, baby. I love you.
We love you. Bye, Madeline. Bye.
Oh, but that's not all.
Is this a first for everybody?
Yeah.
It turns out a lot of people
Fellow citizens of Anacortes!
were planning for the end of treatment too.
Your chocolate face. Your picture's gonna be taken, you know.
Are we ready to celebrate this beautiful young brave lady? Are we ready for a parade?
From the very beginning, from the moment she was diagnosed, our town has been just so supportive.
Let's go!
In an event as colorful as the 4th of July, it felt like the entire town showed up to say,
Thank you.
you did it.
They were there to support us in the beginning, and now they're here to celebrate with us in the end.
Make way for Madeline's parade!
It's going to be great because it just will overpower all those negative memories.
Oh yeah,
Thank you, everybody. We love you so much.
there's just one more thing
Just can't believe it.
left to do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Some days are worth a celebration.
Daddy.
Here you go, Madeline.
For Madeline Kuhnlein,
Yay.
the day is one day
So happy now.
she'd rather not forget. In Anacortes, Jake Wittenberg,
God.
King 5 News.
Great story.
Yeah, that's a fun one. Yeah, and she, last I heard, I know Jake, the reporter I was working with on that, he keeps in touch, and last I heard she's doing well, and everything's going well for her. So that's a kind of a typical story that we really look for in television news, where we want to highlight some of the fun things and the good things that are happening in the communities that we're serving. There's always, of course, so much hard news and crime and tragedies that we cover. It's nice that once in a while have something like this sprinkled in.
Is that the story that's inspired you the most, or is there something else that you've done that's been your inspiration? The one thing that you can go back to and say, I'm so proud of that. You probably have quite a few.
Yeah, one story that always sticks out to me, because even though that was a feature, a really light feature story, I really do enjoy the hard news aspect of my career, because I really think that people like a well-rounded news organization. The viewers who are tuning in want to see all types of news, and that includes coverage of more serious topics. And so one thing on that Vimeo page, there should be, I don't think I pulled it up, so let me pull it up. It's the one with, you'll recognize her. I think it's down here. So this story here is, yeah, just let me set it up a little bit. So this is when Sarah Palin was not known nationally, and she was running for governor. And just to set it up a little bit, because I don't expect everyone to know Alaska's history, there had been a former senator who had been the governor of Alaska for a few years, and he had made some decisions that a lot of people didn't like, and so he was now being seen as like this, you know, the old Republican guard that, you know, wasn't willing to change and embrace new ideas. And so here comes this younger woman who has a lot of energy, and she was very media savvy, and you'll see by this story where she gave me access to a lot of her life on the day of the primary election, the Republican primary. So this story basically chronicles that day.
So you're saying you created Sarah Palin? All right.
I want to bring coffee to those folks holding signs. Some of those guys have been out since 4:30 this morning.
The afternoon of Election Day.
Okay, I love you. Bye.
Sarah Palin works at setting up her own party
We have like Costco cakes and candy.
in the Captain Cook Hotel.
Where's all the stuff that we need for down in the banquet room?
So you guys
Good.
are on a budget, it seems like, huh?
Does it seem that way?
I don't know, you're talking about Costco cakes.
Shh, we gotta sneak them in too.
The final stretch, a million details, appearances, and her son Track has a hockey game.
Okay, so I'm gonna be there, Track, to watch at least 2 periods, okay?
It's time to give someone that understands a family. Tell you what, we are a family.
Palin stops in to see one of her mentors, time enough to hear a couple of stories told only the way former Governor Wally Hickel can tell them. A man who calls Governor Murkowski a friend, but supports Palin to take Alaska's top job.
The governor of Alaska can't be a politician. Frank's a good politician. He's in the Senate. That's all political. Here, you've got to say what's best for us. You have to.
Yeah, thank you.
Then to the street corner, in the rain, joining her passionate supporters.
Nothing's within our control or our hands anymore. It's in the voters' hands.
And with that,
Right there.
less than 4 hours until the polls close,
I will let a few folks know that.
Palin and her family head to the ice rink to watch number 9.
Go, Track.
A brief escape from politics, although with number 9 ticking off the minutes in the penalty
It's
box,
political.
Palin can't help but draw comparisons.
Kind of reflective, though, of a campaign. There's some dirty check-in. If somebody's going to come out the winner.
How you guys doing? We ready to win tonight?
After the polls close, the party starts, and despite the festive atmosphere, the tension builds.
How's Sarah going to do tonight?
Husband Todd Palin makes the rounds. Sarah welcomes her supporters.
I can't believe you guys drove in. I can't believe you drove in, though.
And then the first indication, a call from a precinct on the Kenai Peninsula.
We just took Sterling with 60.44%, our first precinct. Sarah 463, Binkley 165, and Murkowski 138.
Wow.
We double checked it. It's real.
A small group hovers over the only laptop in the room,
41% of the voting already.
nervously refreshing the Division of Elections website. The speeches start.
And we are a little bit different. Sarah Palin is different.
And then
50.4. Look at it. 50.4 landslide. It's over. She won.
the first official return.
50.4.
The makings of a landslide in the works.
Did you see that, Sarah?
I couldn't see any of those numbers, but somebody said that they were good.
You had almost 27,000. They had 16,000 already.
The celebration begins. The Palin faithful start their march to Election Central.
Okay, we're walking.
Good job, Sarah.
Good job, Todd.
The candidate and her chief advisor, Todd, still plotting how to handle it all.
But we sure don't claim anything, right?
We don't claim nothing.
Okay.
As the mob hits Election Central, Palin becomes the main attraction.
Hi, guys. How are you? Nice to see you. Thank you, guys.
And as more precincts report, she holds on to a 20-point margin over John Binkley. While she never claims victory, her opponents concede defeat.
Sarah? Mr. Binkley, for you.
John Binkley? Just grab this. Well, it's not over yet. I thank you so much. That is, I'm very humbled by that, John. I appreciate that, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Sarah! Sarah! In the mayhem of Election Central, she crosses paths with her next foe.
Hey, how are you? Congratulations. Yeah, good job. Oh, this will be fun. Oh, golly.
Tony Knowles versus Sarah Palin. It starts now. Sarah! Just one more concession. Frank Murkowski becomes one of only 2 incumbent governors in state history to lose in the primary.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You got my support.
Thank you.
And I'll do everything I can to see that you get elected. I mean
appreciate
that.
Thank
All right?
you. Thank you.
Good luck to you
You're
and your family.
gonna make me cry, and
No, I don't want you to
I'm
cry.
trying not.
Oh, you've won a beautiful victory. Much
you.
to your credit and your volunteer. We're very proud of
It's
you.
much to my volunteers, believe me.
A 42-year-old Wasilla warrior unseating a 26-year political veteran.
He's given a lot of years, a lot of sacrifice.
And in some respects, Sarah Palin's battle is only beginning.
Well, the starting line is, soon. Yeah, thanks.
Interesting.
Yeah, so of course she went on to be governor and then the vice presidential candidate 2 years later. And now she has more or less disappeared at least in Alaska news. We don't really cover her much anymore unless she makes some news nationally. And that's mostly because she just doesn't pay much attention to us either. So,
So what do you see as the future of online journalism, especially from your perspective as a creator of content? Because you don't really work on the back end, the content management system or anything else. You have other folks working that technology. How do you see yourself and the future of that?
Yeah, well, I think,
yeah,
I think that we're all storytellers ultimately. I think that since there has been a long tradition of storytelling throughout human history and different cultures and humanity, I don't think that's really going to change. The technology has changed. And so, especially with video, I believe it's a tool to really connect emotionally with subjects of stories because it's so real. It's like looking through a window into somebody else's life. And you can, like that story there, you could see how emotional Sarah was getting when Frank Murkowski came and conceded to her. And you don't necessarily see that with a still picture. But you can hear her voice starting to crack. You can see her starting to get teary-eyed. And you can see the reaction of Murkowski. And so that's something that is pretty unique when it comes to media. And that's why I love video so much, is because you really can get a window into what people are feeling and thinking. And hopefully, like I said, with my style of storytelling, you can really understand that in the moment of the event. And so I think, in order to answer your question, I think that those stories have a place in any kind of platform, whether it's television, which is the native form, legacy form of video, or online. Stories like that still have a life online. And a good example of that is a colleague of mine named Boyd Hoopert, who he's here actually speaking at the workshop here this week, and he has a franchise called the Land of 10,000 Stories that's in Minnesota. Are you guys familiar at all with his work? Okay, so he does stories. His stories are more like the first example I showed, that are really heartwarming and have a strong emotional connection with the audience. And so he will post those on social media and create a following, and he's had a real large success doing that. And they get a lot of shares and a lot of retweets, and people are seeing his work now in that way and I don't know the numbers, but if it hasn't eclipsed the television side, it's probably approaching it. He was sharing with me some of the stories that he does are, within a few days, they're up to around 80,000 views on care11.com. So those stories, even though those stories traditionally would be shown on television in a television news format, they have a life online. So I think that on digital platforms, it's just a different delivery method, and it's where people are watching.
Well, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but do you use any type of social media like Boyd does to get content or to explore the audience in a way that they are feeding him? Because he gets stories from his audience quite a bit through social media. How do you guys leverage that at the Alaska Dispatch News?
We are still kind of in the infancy, and I talked earlier about our experience with social media and digital platform, just by being in a smaller market and not having as many resources at our disposal as larger markets. We're just kind of behind the game on that, and so we're still developing our philosophy. And so as a result, there's not a real good plan for a lot of journalists who are on the street creating the content. And some are experimenting. We have a couple of reporters that are experimenting with Snapchat and figuring out how to produce journalism through Snapchat. Tweets and Twitter, of course, is something that I use and am experimenting with. But a lot of it, honestly, is I produce a story like some of the ones that are on adn.com, and then I'm tweeting out a link or sharing a link on Facebook and getting shares that way. And honestly, at this point, most of our video is being shared on Facebook, and that's where a lot of our hits come from, our traffic comes from that. And part of the reason why we haven't done more is because we're putting it off in, actually this month, our entire website at adn.com is being redesigned, and we're using some of Washington Post's technology and templates and their back-end system to publish our website. So there's gonna be a lot of changes here in the next 6 months or so, and we'll have more options for sharing video, and our video players can be a lot different.
Do things change in Alaska a little bit slower because of the kind of disconnect from the lower 48?
Yeah, we just got Garbage Pail Kids.
You just got Garbage Pail Kids?
Yeah, remember those?
Are you serious?
From the 80s?
Okay.
I'm just kidding. No,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
we're kind of behind the times a little bit. Yeah, things seem to be slower in Alaska.
Never been to Alaska. It's a different kind of place.
Yeah.
And it does change a little bit slower, I think, than the rest of the country, just because of the nature of the state.
Yeah, and and that's that fact, and the fact that I'm in a newspaper now and not at a television station. Some of the fundamental differences that I deal with between the two kinds of legacy television news organization or newspaper news organization, the cultural differences are pretty significant to me. In a television newsroom, we have our deadlines are governed by the shows. So your story is due at 10:02, because it airs at 10:02, and if you don't get it in by 10:02, then you haven't done your job for the day. So there's a lot of intense pressure, and from that very strict deadline comes a very strict culture of producing content on a regular basis at very regular times. In a newspaper, it's a little bit more lenient because traditionally, who reads newspaper in here? So, yeah. So the newspaper is printed, at 2 a.m.
For those of you in our online audience, we saw two hands.
For those who, the paper's printed at like 2 a.m. and it's okay if you're 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late or, even up to an hour. Like one time I was trying to file, this was back Thanksgiving time, trying to file a photo, and the copy editor told me that, my deadline was about 8:30. So I'm thinking, okay, I got to get it in by 8:30. And then I was having a little bit of trouble with the contrast or something. And I said, hey, can I take an extra few minutes? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll probably be good until 9:30. You get it to me by 9:30. So I mean, that's just kind of the difference, where it's pretty lax. And so the culture shock was a lot for me to understand.
Does that change in time allow you to explore stories in a different way, so that now when you're working in that online environment, you can tell the story with a lot more detail, maybe because you have the time to work it, and also the time online that you're not constricted by a newscast?
Yeah.
Does that allow you to do that?
Well, yeah, definitely in a television newscast, it's a finite amount of time. It's the same news hole every day. You have to fill the same amount of programming every single day. To a large degree in a newspaper and online, you can expand that news hole or contract the news hole depending on what the content is for that day. So typically in a television situation, the producers of the shows are trying to pack in as much news as possible, because the theory goes, if you change subjects, and this isn't always true, but you change subjects more, 10 times in 10 minutes, you're going to keep viewers' attention, rather than, because you're going to hit more topics that they might be interested in. But if you have only 2 stories in that 10 minutes, the people who aren't interested in those stories are going to tune out. So that's the idea. But online, you can theoretically go as long as you want. But my philosophy is that a story is told, the length of a story is very dependent on how much material you have and the interesting aspect of the material. So when the material ceases to be interesting, the story better be over. And so that's how I've always approached storytelling. So it hasn't really changed in that sense. But I don't have a producer breathing down my neck saying, you got to cut 5 seconds out of this story so I don't go over in my show. Because I have 22 minutes and I'm already at 22:05. So you have to cut 5 seconds out of your story. I mean, and that happens. It doesn't happen so much in smaller markets, but at the network level, it happens. Like literally, they'll say, no, your story can't be 1:30. It has to be 1:28. So you have to find 2 seconds to cut out of your story. I mean, it's that rigid at the network level.
I think we have some questions.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we're going to open it up here for student questions. I'll go ahead and ask the first one,
Sure.
and I'll start with just a statement. Scott very casually mentioned that he's worked at both King and Care, which, for those of you not familiar with the TV industry, those are the top 2 stations in the country. So it was a very casual mention of of saying something really impressive. So I want to know what the job market and what the business of news is in Alaska. How big is your newsroom? Is it typical for, down here in the lower 48, or are y'all running on a smaller scale? Are there more job opportunities up there? Things along those lines.
Well, I think that our newsroom at the Dispatch is maybe a little bit unusual. Because we're still in the early stages of this merger, and I don't predate the merger. I started well after that, so I don't really know the cultures super well. I just know what I'm in right now. But I get the sense that still trying to figure it out. And so the 2 staffs coming together has created this large staff, and those numbers seem to be stable. So my guess is we probably have a newsroom staff of, I'd say we have 8 photographers, 20 reporters, probably another half dozen copy editors, another half dozen in the sports department, 10 editors maybe. So I mean, what is that? It's about 60, 65 people or so, 70 people.
So that's a fairly big newsroom.
Yeah, it seems like it's a big newsroom.
And when you're one of a few number of newsrooms in a very, very large state, what's your coverage area? What's the farthest away you've ever been sent to go cover a story?
I've been to Adak, Alaska. I've actually been to the Russian Far East. That was several years ago. That was Russian Far East. up to Barrow. I've traveled from Alaska. I've covered stories in Mexico and on the East Coast. I went to the Republican convention in 2008 to cover Sarah Palin. Yeah, so I mean, we cover, but mostly in state. We cover most communities in state. I mean, if there's big news happening in some small village somewhere in northwestern Alaska, then that's newsworthy, and we're probably going to go cover it. And that's the way.
Those of you from Texas, Texas is not the biggest state. That would be Alaska. It's huge. So
yeah, flying from Anchorage to Barrow is like flying from Houston to South Dakota or Minneapolis. I mean, it's pretty far.
All right. Any student questions? Open the floor.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. My name is Jonathan Borgiani. Definitely appreciate you coming and talking.
Yeah, thanks.
Very interesting. Wrote the most questions out of all the things here I would have for you. First, as one of, you said 2 of the video editors, how much sway do you have in what stories you want to do?
And this was another part of the newspaper culture that I didn't really understand. I have a lot of leeway, and I can cover, and it might just be my photo editor that allows me this, but I can cover a lot of what I'm interested in. And it sometimes makes it difficult because, so for instance, we're doing, Alaska has a legislation that just was passed to allow marijuana cultivation and retail sales. And so, and I can show this story here in a second. It's on one of those tabs. And so I'm interested in it. And if I was working at a television station, we would do this story because TV is our medium and we would do it in a video form. But I got to this story and yeah, that's it. And I'm halfway through interviewing the gentleman who's opening up this business. And I realized there's just so much detail in this story, and there are just not a lot of visuals. And so it really should not be a video story. But video is my medium that I use, and so I went ahead and made it a video story. And I actually wrote more. You can see here I wrote more copy than I normally do. Usually it's just a couple sentences, but I felt like there was a lot of good detail to put in there. So I want to go and play that.
We are not stoners. We're not going to do this half-assed or lazy or not paying attention. That's not how you're going to be successful doing this. It's always professional to me when I do business. So this is not any different. My name is Bryant Thorpe. I have lived in Anchorage for going on 34 years. I am opening Arctic Herbery. When everything is said and done, you will walk through my front door and buy marijuana legally. So this is the office space right here, and then back here is one of my grow areas. I'm slowly getting the thing finished, and we've run power. I've got electrical for everything already run. I guess one of the biggest hurdles is that there is no loans available. You can't go to the bank and say, hey, I want to start a pot business. Can I borrow some money? No, you cannot. When I saw this place go up for sale, I contacted the woman originally, and it took some time to get under contract with her, but she owner financed it. It's a little bit different. But it also keeps me away from the big banks. We're not painting the white ones, I assume, right? A lot of rules. Yeah, there's been a lot to go through. Every square inch of the place has to be under surveillance. It all has to be videotaped and then recorded and preserved for 40 days so that they can go back and look. And that includes everything in the grow areas as well, so that nothing, nobody can be skimming off the top, and it all has to be weighed and tracked. Not everybody's gonna be happy about it. 47% voted no. I have to have tough skin. I know that. I was at the community council meeting, and my neighbors are not all that happy with me. They have some concerns. This one was concerned about parking, rightfully so. I would imagine it'll be a bit busy when I first open. One behind me, he's concerned about vandals. But I'm getting this, in a professional way, and I will address any concerns as best I can as they arise. I feel a responsibility just to be professional about it because there's so many prying eyes. There's so many people looking at you that are waiting for you to do it wrong, or waiting to try to shut you down, or whatever. And so if I'm going to be in front of everybody, then I insist on doing it properly and professionally.
That's not really one of your typical stories, is it? It's because it's not very visual.
No, no. But but I was interested in the topic, and I hadn't seen a lot of, to answer your question a little bit more, I hadn't seen a lot of this kind of coverage of hearing from entrepreneurs in our coverage of the issue. So I'm like, I want to go out and do it. So my editor's like, yeah, that's cool, go do it. And I think that it would maybe early to do this story. If I do this story in another month or another 4 months, the grow operations will be up and running, and they'll have plants that we can see. But we're telling the story of this legislation, so this is just one more way of telling it.
Thank you. And yeah, I really did like the interview there. You caught some good moments. It showed some passion. Another one, I watched some of your videos, and there was another one, the Alan Moore and Ali Zirkle. That was a really emotional one that really was completely made by emotion. And actually, what you just said, like about follow-up stories, leads me into more of kind of along the same line as my other question too. If I understand correctly, in media, a big time is the election season.
Yeah.
A lot of people watch that. So one thing that I and a lot of other people have noticed is that Bernie Sanders it's really getting treated disgustingly by the media, especially MSNBC, letting Hillary Clinton do follow-up questions to town halls when she's not even agreeing to do interviews. Debates.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, Alaska, Bernie Sanders won with over 80%,
right?
Considerably over. And months ago, the super delegates pledged to Hillary Clinton before anything. I definitely think a story could be told there to just shed light and on the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that would be a possible angle that you would do, and maybe how you would? Because I'm interested in that kind of stuff. How would you do that kind of video?
Specifically with video in mind.
Yes.
Yeah. See, and that'd be a tough video to do because there is so much policy. I would imagine that if I was going to do a story like that, I would find a Bernie Sanders rally, and of course the election, the primary selection is over there in Alaska, so I'm not sure if there would be a rally, but just find some rabid fans of Sanders and possibly then also Clinton, to find the other side of that. Yeah, and politics isn't my beat, so I'm not super familiar with the super delegates and that. So that would probably be, frankly, with our news organization, it would probably be told through text and through a more traditional print reporter. So I could pass you along to one of our other people if you're interested. Okay. Yep.
So I have a couple questions. One, I actually really like that last one, maybe even more than the other ones because it was a character-driven narrative. There was no reporter. How often do you do those kind of stories versus, because the ones you did before seemed like TV pieces,
right,
where there's a reporter, like a unidentified reporter's voice over it. And I really like the character-driven narratives. And when you have a website and you're coming from sort of a newspaper company, you have that ability to do that because the metaphor isn't the same as TV. So that's my first question.
It is funny how it just feels different on a newspaper website where a piece like that is more appropriate. Because I do voiced pieces occasionally, and I'll answer that in a second, the reason why. But it's like it's like a natural sound story, which is that. Was that
it's a bit of like documentary style?
Yeah, and it feels like it goes better with the type of journalism that's on a newspaper website. Now, a television station traditionally uses voiced packages, narrated packages, for a couple of reasons. One, you can condense a lot of information into a shorter amount of time. because you typically have to, because what I talked about earlier, you have a smaller news hole, and because you can write it. And then the other reason is that it's faster. It's faster to produce a written story because you can collect the information and regurgitate it in your own words rather than trying to ask the right questions for somebody to say. And then you have to sift through all that material and put it in the right order. So for instance, on that piece, it was probably a half an hour interview with that gentleman. And it was so much to go through. And if I had been able to write, I mean, if I'd wanted to do a story, more of a traditional TV story like on that, then I would have probably gotten more information in that 2 minutes. But I don't feel like, most of the time, I don't feel like that's really appropriate for the medium, for the online medium.
I mean, we definitely talk to students about doing character-driven narratives, and we do emphasize that it takes a lot of time and it's much harder than it looks.
Yeah.
But the results can be, I think, much more intimate.
Yeah, more powerful.
Yeah. Because you had a story that didn't have a lot of visuals, but yet I was sort of drawn in because that person was telling me the story, as opposed to, a reporter.
And it's interesting on that story, I had a conversation. So I finished that piece, just as you saw it, and then I had a conversation with my editor afterward, and I asked her, do you think that I need to have the other side? And I did the interview with somebody who was kind of against him being in the neighborhood. And ultimately we decided that it would have been strange to have another voice in because it was just his story. That plus the fact that he addressed the other side and he talked about how his neighbors weren't happy with him. And so he was in a way almost representing both sides of that issue, and he was being fair. So we felt like that kind of put him in a neutral position.
I think you have the opportunity with some story like that too, to do like a full multimedia package that might have one from his side, one from the other side, and and be able to have lots of other resources and data and stuff like that.
Right.
So that might be really interesting. Okay, so my second question though is about sort of newer trends in video, like virtual reality and 360 video. Are you excited about that? Do you see potential for that?
Yeah, as it goes with my style, it's difficult to edit a story with 360 video, and it's also difficult to shoot a story in 360 video because it's almost like the journalists have to become part of the process. I know when New York Times was experimenting with their 360 video, it came out that the journalists who produced the videos, and I'm just hearing this from some of my colleagues, that they were talking about how the journalists set up the shots because they had to go hide behind a podium or something because they weren't in it. Yeah, but they weren't doing that, and so my ethics tell me that I can't stage shots and I can't direct people and I can't tell people what to do. So that's one of those gray areas that we got to figure out. But on the surface, the solution to that is that the journalist just becomes a character and it becomes more of a first person narrative, and the journalist's experience, which is really what a lot of newspaper journalists have done with video. There's a lot of, I went here and I saw this. And virtual reality, I don't know. I mean, that sounds cool. And I think it has some applications for live video. I would like to see newspaper websites, or all websites in general, do more live video, because that's one of the things I love about video, is that you're taking your viewers to a place, they're taking your viewers to a place that they wouldn't normally be. So, for instance, when the revolution was happening in Egypt a few years ago, there was live video coming out on Twitter, or not on Twitter, but on phones and YouTube, and we're an American, we're not going to experience that, so we can get a little taste of what that is halfway around the world. Yeah, Facebook. Yeah, and Facebook. Yeah. So, so it's just a window video, especially with all the handheld devices and the abilities to stream from remote places. You can take people to different places in the world that they wouldn't normally be.
What about drones? Do you use those at the Alaskan Dispatch?
We have our application in with the FAA, and we're awaiting approval. But we have not done any of our own drone work. We've partnered with a media company in Alaska that does drone work. And in fact, on that Iditarod coverage, there was one of our other photographers did a video just with the drone video, which is beautiful. You know.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what kind of stories would you think would lend itself to a drone type story? Have you run into any where you're like, oh, I wish I had a drone for this? Or
Oh, well, when I covered the Iditarod in early March, and being able to fly through the canyons and the waterfalls and the sea ice. I mean, you just make beautiful images that way. So that would be nice. And, I mean, anywhere in Alaska, really. I mean, it's a very visual place.
All right. Once again, thank you for coming out to speak with us again today. I got a couple questions for you. First one is you talked very briefly about how you started off, your first job was you just walked into a studio and you're just interested and they put you on just working a camera and everything. So I'd say how important do you think it is that you started off at a base level, working at literally the grunt level, and got to see how the inner workings of the entire industry, and how do you think that played into your career further on? And second question is, you say you worked in Anchorage, Seattle, you kind of jumped all over the place through your career. Who's the most influential person you've had a chance to work with or experience who's inside the industry that you think's given you a good insight to help your job?
Yeah, to answer your first question, my experience starting at a fairly young age, still in high school, I think was really important to the career track that I was on, because I was exposed, that early to technology and the equipment that I still use today to some degree, the types of equipment and the types of techniques. So getting in early and being able to practice it is pretty vital. You guys know the author Malcolm Gladwell at all? So he wrote a book called The Outliers, probably a decade ago or so, and talks in there about the 10,000 hour rule. And that's basically when you are practiced at a craft for 10,000 hours, and that's actual time, whatever it is, plumbing or video journalism or whatever it is, writing, you become at that 10,000 hour mark. There's something that magical that happens there, and I actually calculated it out, and I figured I had probably hit about 10,000 hours in my career, in my practice, by the time I was, my late 20s, which is coincided when I won the Photographer of the Year award. So, so there's some truth to that. The more you practice, the better you're going to get. And if you're super intense in your interests, whatever they are, if you're practicing them constantly. I mean, there were days in college when I was, in college in Oregon, I'd be in the edit room for 20 hours a day, working on projects. And because I was just so obsessed with it at that point. In my first few jobs, I'd stay all hours of the night working on stories and going out and shooting stories on my own time and really looking for those interesting character-driven stories. And so I developed at a rate that probably was a little bit faster than others of my peers. So then your second question about who is influential was, yeah, probably who I worked with most closely. There are two names really come to mind, and one was my manager when I was at CARE in Minneapolis. In 1999, I met him. His name is Brett Akagi, and he was, and still is, a master when it comes to technical photography, videography, and editing. And there's a whole litany of rules that you follow. How many of you guys have done video, like learned about sequencing in video jump cuts, and so Brett Brett he's a machine when it comes to this, and so he taught me a lot of those techniques, and I really took on a lot of his characteristics. And then another fellow, his name's J.R. Mann, who is he's a executive producer in San Diego now, and he taught me the other side of the craft. I mean, Brett did too, but JR taught me the other side of the craft, which is more the content side and the emotional side. And it's funny because JR, by contrast of Brett, JR was not really caring about the visual structure of stories. He just would shoot whatever was most compelling. It was the America's Funniest Home Videos approach to shooting news. And you guys, America's Funniest Home Videos is like whatever. I mean, it's the same thing as watching cat videos on YouTube now, where what's funny and what's interesting is going to be the most compelling to the viewer. So in JR's experience, and he taught it to me, it's what's emotional, what's going to capture somebody's heart, whether it be happiness, sadness, something's humorous, something makes you angry, whatever moments tap into your emotion is really what's going to grab people's attention. So those are the two, JR and Brett.
Thanks for coming. What's the manliest Alaska story that you've either heard of or you've covered? And I'm talking life-threatening or dangerous stuff.
That I have that I've done, or well, I was 10 feet from a grizzly bear, and I had a tough guy next to me with a gun, but he didn't have to shoot the bear. That was there's a place called McNeil River Sanctuary, and it's in Cook Inlet. If you know where Homer, Alaska is, it's near Homer. And the state takes tourists and people who want to go out and see the bears. A lot of photographers get these passes to go out, and the bears just walk around you, essentially. But they've never had an incident. They're habituated to humans, so that was fun. Probably the dumbest thing I've ever done, and it gives me chills.
We're recording this.
Yeah. So I was doing a story in 2007 on a whale hunt out of Barrow, and it's the spring hunt. So the ice is, it's like May, but the sea ice is still like 5 miles out of Barrow at that point. So you snowmobile out to the edge of the ice, and they have the Alaska natives there have these whaling camps set up all along the edges of the ice, and they wait for the whale. And as soon as a whale is harpooned and they're dragging it ashore, everybody converges on the spot, and they have the block and tackle system with the pulleys and the rope, and they pull this 50-ton animal up on the ice to butcher it. And so they, I'm thinking of my techniques. I need a great wide shot, right? Everybody know what a wide shot is? Establishes the scene. And so to get a great wide shot, I wanted to have the whale in the foreground, but I didn't want to have the sea in the background. So I had to go on the other side of the whale. You see where I'm going? To get the people in the background pulling it up. So I had to back myself up to the edge of the sea ice. And because the whale was only being pulled up like 15 feet or so from the edge of the ice. So I backed up to the point where I'm hanging off the edge of the ice. It was a great shot. But man, I don't know. I give myself chills when I think about that, because that could have really been a disaster. I mean, you gotta be smart, and I was not smart, because that ice could have given way, and everybody else was, 100 yards away from me, or maybe not that far, but probably 30 yards away from me. And if they saw me go in, then I don't know. Yeah.
Hi. Okay, so you said that you go visit Seattle often. I was wondering if you're going there to work or do any projects, or just for pleasure.
Yeah, to work. So yeah, when I referred to that, it was just to give a little more detail, between 2005 and now, I worked in Anchorage from 2005 to 2009, and then I worked in Seattle 2009-10, and then I went back to Anchorage, and that's when I did the Atwood Professor, and so that was in 2011 and 2012, and then in mid-2012 I went back to Seattle, and that's when I became the manager of the photo staff at King, and then came back to Anchorage last summer, and I came back. And honestly, the reason I did that is because just for personal reasons. My wife wasn't a huge fan of Seattle, so she wanted to get back to Alaska, and I did too. But yeah, that's the reason.
I'll go ahead and ask the last question if Dave doesn't mind. Other than passion, which I love that you mentioned, and honestly trying to hone your skills while you can, what other skills do you recommend that students get right now if they are into video and really want to be a video storyteller?
I would say curiosity about other professionals, and and you guys can contact me separately too. I'll give you my contact information if you want to run stories by me. But contact other professionals in the industry. A lot of professionals that are associated with the folks that are here for this workshop. The same kind of circles that I'm a part of. There are probably 100 people who would look at your work and give you feedback. And then it's just going out and practicing, like I was talking about earlier, going out and really practicing those skills. One of the things I told the staff in Seattle was that you have to practice the craft of video storytelling every single day, because you have to be sharp and be ready for the big story, because you don't know when the big story is going to happen. And you have to shoot every story as if it is the big story, because it may not start out as the big story, but then it turns into the big story. And if you haven't shot it well, then all of a sudden you want to turn on your skills when you realize that this is really the big story, then the story is not going to be as good as if it had been if you had put your effort, 100% effort into it from the beginning. So I mean, really having the integrity to commit to your story that you're telling, and commit to your skills, and I think that is what I've tried to do throughout my adult life, and that's maybe why I've had some success in this field.
All right, so let's thank Scott Jensen for coming in.
Thank you, guys.
Undergrads, don't forget to sign in on your way out. Scott, if you have a few minutes to stick around.
Yeah, sure. Yep, definitely.
Thanks, everyone, for
Thanks,
coming
you guys.
in.